Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first ever Post-Mortem Roundtable for the Micro Chicago Playwrights Ensemble. My name is Dakota Pariset. I'm the creative director and co-founder of Micro Chicago. We are a relatively new outfit here in the city, and we specialize in, you guessed it, micro theater. Which is pretty much anything under what the neo-futurists do, which is the 2-page limit. We don't want to step on that. That's their thing. Leave it alone. But anything smaller than that is the space in which we play and we explore. We've been around just over two and a half years. It initially started as a co-curated collaboration with our friends at Production Productions. And we made a couple of projects, and then amicably we split, and it became kind of a property under another project called the Lightbulb Factory. All that said, now it's its own entity, just floating out there in the universe, the Chicago theater sphere. And over the past couple of years, as we've continued to make things, we've been really fortunate to have those really, really bright stars kind of ascend for us. And at the end of last year, I started to think, well, what was the next natural step for a growing company? And that answer always usually lends to community and building ensemble, which is the natural thing in Chicago. And so when we started to think about, well, who are kind of those 4 stars on the flag that is our project, these lovely individuals who are about to introduce themselves came to mind. And they were all really gracious and open as we pieced together this kind of initial season, which is a breakdown of 4 quarterly releases based on themes provided by those playwrights. And yeah, I'm talking a lot, so I'm going to let the playwrights take the stage. So go ahead, just introduce yourselves, pronouns if you feel inclined. And yeah, how did you get here? Where are you from? Feel free to go.
So I'll start off. My name is Scott Carter Cooper. He, him, his. I have been around almost since the dawn of time in Chicago theater. Started out as an actor, transitioned into playwriting. I guess that's all I really have to say to introduce myself right now. I'll cede the stage to Rachel.
I'm Rachel Herriges. I use she, her pronouns, and I have only been in Chicago for a year and a half. I'm from Oregon, specifically Salem, Oregon, which is not Portland, but kind of close. And I moved to Chicago because I moved in with one of my lovely roommates that I had in college when I went to school in Santa Barbara, California. And I wanted to do theater and I wanted to act, and I didn't want to move to LA or New York. So here I am. And I will pass it over to David.
Hello, I'm David Lipschutz, he, him. I have been in Chicago for 18 years. I grew up in the south suburbs, though, so I always said I was from Chicago. And really, the only time I haven't lived in the vicinity of Chicago was for the 4 years I went to college in DC. So really, I'm a lifelong Chicagoan. I don't think I have an accent, but in college, those 4 years that I was away from the city, everyone consistently made fun of my accent, saying I had the most Midwest accent. So I don't see it. I don't hear it. Like, I'm not the guys on Dub Bears on SNL, but maybe I am. Maybe someone will listen or watch this and be like, "Wow, that is a Midwest accent." Oh, I will hand the baton off to Tanise.
Hi, I'm Tanise Robnett. I'm originally from, I use she, her pronouns. I'm originally from St. Louis, Missouri, but I came here in 1993 to attend college at Northwestern University in Evanston. And I've been living in the Chicagoland area ever since. I'm currently living in the suburb of Forest Park.
Lovely. Well, thank you all again for making a little bit of time on a cold, kind of nice day, but cold Sunday night. Um, yeah, again, I when we were going through to figure out we and me when I was going through to find kind of who would be again those four initial pillars of this project that we're building. I was just really grateful, and just gracious to see your guys' names continually pop up as I was going through. Um, so just at the top, thank you guys for just your openness to this process and to this thing that we're building. You know, it's I think it's a unique time in the world, but it's especially a unique time to be a theater artist and to be a theater artist in Chicago. And I've been lucky enough, even outside of the wonderful work that you've submitted to the growing canon of Micro Chicago as playwrights, but I've been lucky to get to know each of you in different capacities as actors or technicians or directors or what have yous. So I guess the first kind of question that I wanted to ask is, what is it that brings you to the table to write, and what continually brings you back? What's the big why? What's the secret sauce when it comes to your identification as a playwright?
Well, I guess I'm first up. I write plays because I need an artistic outlet. I spent a number of years climbing the corporate ladder trying to deny my artistic needs and succumbed to them about 10 years ago and landed on actually writing plays as a form of artistic expression that I'm finding to be actually quite satisfying. Each play that I come to that I write it for a different reason. And I don't normally or always know what that reason is until I'm somewhere mid-process. Sometimes I wrote a play several years ago, A White Man in a Black Box, which was a direct response to the beginning of the Me Too movement that I feel kind of was birthed in Chicago. And I felt like I had something to express, a point of view, when I sat down and wrote that play. And during COVID, I started writing a play that I had no idea what it was or why I was writing it. And during the whole process of COVID, it just sort of evolved so that as we began to emerge, I felt like I had a finished play. So each play kind of dictates its own reason and its own gestation process.
Mm-hmm. That was awesome. That was so good. For me, I feel like, well, I just wrote a play one day in college. I was like, I'm feeling angsty, so I'm gonna write a play. And I think that it became a way for me to tell stories. I don't know. I grew up writing in those composition notebooks, and I would make these whole worlds based on the Warrior Cats franchise. Don't know if you've heard of that, but it's just a bunch of cats, and it's like drama. And it's just cat drama, and they're all like feral. And so I made like my own like world of the cats, right? And it was like 3 or 4 composition books of it, like just full. And so I know I've always loved to write, but I just didn't know where to channel it. And I just feel like playwriting is such a collaborative and physical and like beautiful, like you can make it however you wish, and the director can take it in whatever way that they wish, and you can create a product that you didn't even know you could create, right? It's just such a lovely, creative, and collaborative craft that I just keep coming back to it because I feel like there's always more stories to tell, right? Yeah.
kind of piggybacking on what both Scott and Rachel said. Um, I write to kind of like keep the creative juices flowing, but also just to like get out of my real world headspace. And you know, my whatever my day was like, writing, I can kind of dive into it. I've At first, when I was writing, I definitely had this mindset of, oh, it has to be performed and it has to be performed this way. Like that is like what's in my brain. But as time has progressed, it's like, it's okay if this play doesn't get performed. Like it's good that I just put pen to paper and created this very dumb universe that I just created. And I say dumb because if I'm not finishing a play and thinking that's the dumbest thing I've ever written, I have not succeeded in what I set out to do. I always got to one up myself.
Okay. I grew up with a very artistic family. They loved doing plays. They would we would have family reunions and there would always be a play. And I was always I was in a lot of them. Um, and so that just kind of lended itself to like me thinking, well, I want to make my own plays. Like the plays that we've done in the family. So I kind of just started doing that. I think I wrote my first one when I was 16. And it was horrible, like you said. It was like, how did I write this and why? Um, but I feel like I've improved. When I went to Northwestern, I started out in journalism because I wanted a career in writing. But then I ended up getting into playwriting and screenwriting classes, and just kind of fell in love with that process. And I guess most of all, I really like telling stories. And I think playwriting is a really, like Rachel said, collaborative way of telling stories. And I also like to make people laugh and to move people. So you can definitely do that on stage with actors and directors and such. So I guess that's the gist of it. I also like to write stories that like you wouldn't expect. Like I wrote a couple of anti-romantic romantic comedies. Um, so that kind of thing. So yeah, that's what drew me too.
Lovely. You guys kind of already naturally led or answered this kind of follow-up question. But what is it that, how does a play kind of come about for you? Is it something that you think the universe like drops into your life, or is it like a simple moment and then your brain just kind of starts going? Or I'm always very curious about what a playwright's initial inception of an idea is. So that could be a specific play or just a general part of your process. But I guess to start us off, David, how does it begin for you?
Yeah, so it's usually I hear something like a friend tells a story or I hear a word or like some historical thing happen, and I find it interesting or funny and I'm like I'm gonna write about that. Like that sounds great. It's just an idea that like a seed that's planted in my brain that I mean, for the most part, I mostly write 10-minute plays. That's kind of my focus. And so it's the perfect amount of attention span for me to finish the play once I start writing it, like in one sitting. And yeah, no, it's usually like just a reaction to something that I've heard or seen or something I find interesting. So I write it with my interest in mind. And so if it ends up getting to the stage, that's great because I'm sharing something that I found interesting with others, with other humans. But that's one part, but then for longer plays, I've been tending to write kind of parodies of other full lengths, uh, because I also love to make people laugh, and the easiest way to make someone laugh is to make fun of something else, uh, in my in my way of writing. So that would be my answer to that.
Um, I usually like sometimes it's an experience that I've gone through, but I kind of make it more hyperactive, um, and more obviously with structure and things like that. So, like for instance, I love dueling pianos. And so I wrote a dueling piano screenplay. Um, and or like I have a broken engagement. So I wrote a play about what a man goes through. Not I'm not a man, but the main character was a man, after being left at the altar. So a lot of it comes from personal experience that I just kind of turn on its head. Um, and some of it's just like these prompts, they make things like interesting because it's just like you have to research and stuff like that. But we'll get into that later. And sometimes it is events that happened and just kind of taking a smaller perspective on a big issue. So I think that's the gist of it.
I respond really well to formula and structure, and so I look at a calendar, and I have a personal goal of completing a full-length play by Labor Day every year, and so that Labor Day sort of begins my creative year. It's kind of that's when I started thinking about school, and that rhythm is just kind of in my soul. So the Tuesday after Labor Day, I spend the remainder of that calendar year just writing notes, right? Just letting myself kind of vomit up just any old idea that, crosses through my mind. And then as the calendar changes, January 1st, then I start really looking at those notes and saying, what am I responding to, right? And those notes can be anything from a pretty structured outline for a play, to just, a blob of words that wouldn't mean anything to anyone but me. And right about this time of year is when I kind of hone in on to, okay, this is the play that I'm going to write this year. And it's almost never the play that I start the year thinking, okay, this is my baby, right? And like I said earlier, each play kind of tells you how to write it. So as the process begins, there will be sort of breaking points where I will step back and say, okay, I need to clean the palette, and I'll write a 10-minute play. Or I'll look at my catalog of plays that I think are worthy of the world to see, and I'll say, I almost always feel like I need a 30-minute play or a 60-minute play, right? And so I will try and put something together for that market niche. Like David, I have a pretty broad catalog of 10-minute plays. And so, sometimes as I submit my plays every Saturday morning, and I go through all of the submission opportunities, and there will be, themes or whatever, write to this sort of theme, and sometimes that'll spark an idea, and I'll come up with something. But as we get to, I don't know, Memorial Day, that's when I really have to focus in on and polish up my full-length piece, because Labor Day looms, and that summer moves pretty quickly. And so, that's kind of probably a long-winded version of my process.
My process is very inspired, I guess. If I'm submitting a 10-minute play for something, I often don't write it until like a week before. If it's 10 minutes, if it's longer, obviously that's a different, well, no, that's not a different story. I've written a one act in a week. I always ask a big question, like a what if question, because I feel like in a way, playwrights are kind of like gods in their own way of like you have your little world and you have your little pieces and they do things. So a lot of the times I will sit and think about a scenario about like, well, what if purgatory is actually just people walking around and like doing chores, right? And then I make it happen, right? Or like, what if being immortal would suck, right? Like, and you'd be all alone, and then you make a play about those big questions. And if I'm like working on submission processes or things like that, I always try to get my friends to join me on Zoom, and we do just like a Zoom reading. So it's a good way to like, hang out with your friends, but then you also get to like hear your wonderful play and get feedback on it, right? So yeah, I've tried to be like, I must write every morning, right? Or I must make a routine or something like that. And it always just explodes on me because I'm very, I'm very like inspired by things. And I feel like I'll wake up at 3 a.m. and start writing, right? Because I'm like, that's a good idea, you know? So yeah.
Yeah, the gibberish note in your phone that like when you woke up in the middle of the night.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you're trying to decipher it the next day. Mm.
It's the
But I love what you said about we write best when we procrastinate. It's so true.
Get the most done at least. Like,
But you like with whatever you're submitting to, sure, that will have 1 week's worth of effort. If like, I mean, the fact that you wait only or that you have a full week, I'm impressed with. But you think about it, you now have this play that you haphazardly put together in a week or less, but there's going to be an opportunity down the road somewhere else where you will have actually put more time and effort into it. Like another, a week before that submission is due. So that's 2 weeks now that you've spent working on it.
yes.
So, yeah, I dig.
And luckily, kind of to pivot into the next kind of question, we gave you guys a week to write a 1-page play, which, also didn't come late in the game, but, like, again, plays and kind of like, to your point, Rachel, like we're all kind of gods and we're building these people out of fake clay on a page and then they, live. It's very much kind of how this residency has slowly snowballed into the structure that we have currently, where actually Rachel, in a conversation, because I connected with each of you prior to us going into the process to kind of figure out and tease out like the nuances of it for everybody. And it was kind of in that conversation that we had where you were like, there should be a theme for the whole year or something. And I was like, that's a really great idea. And so kind of off that, and then also inspired by something Jay Rohr, who participated in the Yellow Line project. He wrote a really lovely foreword in which the thing that he kind of described about the L being kind of this connection through the city and this indirect connection between all people, it seemed kind of very natural to utilize that as the kind of core for this inaugural season. Because also, what is theater if not some form of connection? And then kind of off that, we provided each of you the opportunity to submit different themes so that you each had a specific theme that was a part of the DNA of the season, which the first one that we utilized was actually submitted by you, Tanise, which was protest movements in Chicago, which I honestly could not have thought of a better one to kind of start us off, especially with us being so Chicago centric and with the way the world kind of is moving in. So if each of you could kind of, Rachel, if you want to start us off, or actually Tanise, it was your theme. You start us off.
Okay.
You'll close us out, Rachel. What inspired that concept, and then also to and that, what did you choose as your protest movement, and why did you choose that?
Cool. So I've always like kind of had a heart for social issues, and I've always been really impressed with like what women's lib and the civil rights movement and what the LGBTQ community is struggling with now. I've just always been impressed by people fighting when it seems like a losing battle. So that's kind of why I chose that theme. And I also like was thinking to myself while thinking of themes, I don't know anything about any Chicago protests, so this could be really fun. I know a lot about like what happened in Alabama, Mississippi, for civil rights and things like that, but like I didn't really know a lot about Chicago protests, so I was like, yeah, we should explore that. So we did. And how I chose the one I did the sit-in movement at the University of Chicago because they were segregating housing, student housing. And I think I chose that one because I've been a university student. I'm part of that community as far as like being a minority. And it just seemed interesting to me. And sit-ins are like my kind of protests because you just get to like hang out. So, and then as an added bonus, while I was like researching this, I found out that Bernie Sanders was one of the organizers for that University of Chicago sit-in. So that was cool. Yeah, so that's where that comes from.
Yeah. I was introduced to protesting as a baby gay when I moved to Chicago, and there was no boys' town. There was no community center. I worked at Ann Sather's. That's Ann Sather's. The real name is Ann Sather's, but nobody cares. And that
Wait, I care. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I did not know that either.
Well, now I have educated you. But Ann Sather's was the de facto community center, right? And Tom Tunney sort of became one of the community leaders, and I worked there. And I was there before it was called. I was there when it was named the LGBTQ community, because prior to that it was just the gay community. And then somebody said, well, that's not inclusive enough. And so it was originally, the acronym or the letters were GLB. I think it was just GLB. I don't think the T was even included at that point. And I don't remember the conversation, and I can't remember the woman's name because this was, just after the cooling of the earth. And she basically raised her hand and said, I think it's time that we decentralize men. And so the L became the leading letter. My play sort of sprung out of that. I knew a young man, Danny Sotomayor. We'd done a show together, and he had shortly after we did this show, received an HIV positive diagnosis, and he became Chicago's voice for protesting the lack of funding for HIV and AIDS, not only research but support. Being part of the front line and working in that community center, I'm not being hyperbolic when I say people were dying every day. I could walk into work and somebody who was healthy on Monday would be dead on Friday. And that happened regularly, right? It was numbing. A diagnosis had people killing themselves. My regular customers, there was one in particular, a beautiful young man, jumped in front of a train when he got his diagnosis. It was brutal. There are no adequate words. And Danny, a little guy, funny little guy, was fearless in demanding recognition. And it breaks my heart that younger generations not only don't know who Danny Sotomayor was and what he has done to make their lives possible, but in many cases, the idea has just, I don't know, apathy, right? For so many who, 20-year-old gay men, 25-year-old gay men, that's ancient history. And for me, that was my life. And so I felt very strongly that Danny in particular needs to be remembered. There are a whole bunch of people from the 80s and 90s who deserve our remembrance and our respect. And quite frankly, we should look to for inspiration in these times. Danny lit the way for how we should be responding. And that's why I thought that was an important topic to write about.
Yeah.
That was beautiful.
That was really beautiful. Oh. Well, my protest movement that I wrote about is quite recent. It was, March, April, May of last year, when, a lot of colleges were funding Israel, and a lot of college students were standing up against that and saying, no, like, we are not going to be attending class, or we are going to attend class, but we're all just going to camp out on a lawn, and we're all going to ask you to divest. And it was, it was, there was raids happening where police would come in and just destroy everyone's stuff and trample people, right? Like, just because it was a bunch of college students peacefully sitting out on a lawn that is also, part of the college that they attend. And one of the last standing encampments in Chicago was DePaul University. And I was in a film with a lot of DePaul students because I did a lot of student films. They kept me very updated on what was going on. And whenever I walked by, you could just see this like mini city, right? And they had like different sorts of events happening. There was music. It was like a joyful city, right? And I knew college students who were like, yeah, I haven't been in my dorm for 2 weeks because they've just been like out camping, right? And as fun as it is, it's also making a stand. And like, it was constant protesting, peaceful protesting, and education and all of this like wonderful stuff. And then, it was unfortunately raided. Many students were like, it's going to happen soon because we're the last one. And, like it was at 5 a.m, so everybody was sleeping, and it happened, and everything was thrown away, and people were devastated, right? Because they lasted so long, and there was not any notice, there's nothing, and it just happened. And I think that there is something important about college students having a voice, and like being respected, and also standing up for what they believe in. Like more power to you. Like I think it was beautiful to witness and for a good cause. So that's what I wrote about.
I wrote about Occupy Chicago, and the reason I chose that, first of all, I love that we all chose different protests. That like Dakota did not plan this. That I was like, I hope no one writes about Occupy Chicago because it'll probably be better than what I write. Uh, and so I wrote about Occupy Chicago. I remember seeing the marches. I was working downtown uh, in the Loop and seeing the marches and here because I worked off of a street where like marches were happening, and I heard like people on the megaphones uh, uh, chanting and shouting. I worked really close to the Board of Trade, so I think that's why. Um, but while I was uh, researching it, I had learned that there was apparently a guy at the Board of Trade that thought it'd be really funny to have a giant banner at the window saying "We are the 1%," and obviously that did not go over well. And I was like, I want to write about that and see what my brain comes up with in terms of that. And so I always felt bad being someone who was watching from my office and not participating, because I really I respected what the protest was about, but I was fresh out of law school and I was like, I need to work. I also feel like I have that fear that, oh, if I'm at a protest, like I'll get arrested and I'll lose my bar license. Like I go down this rabbit hole of anxiety. And whether or not that's actually true or not, uh, uh, I always found it fascinating that I watched, and I was like, am I one of the bad guys here by not participating and by watching overhead? So that was kind of the where my mindset was when I was writing this little play.
I love kind of to your point. Yeah, I didn't plan that. It was amazing to just slowly see over the week everyone uh, bring in these just very different but very vibrant and very important moments in Chicago history. So I think again, Tanise, thank you for that initial that exciting moment for us, and I'm really excited. 3 more quarters to go, and Rachel, David, and Scott, y'all got something in the wings, and I'm excited to see what that is. To kind of get into the slow wind down, I'm again, this is, I don't want to say it's a new art form, but it's definitely not. I think a more I don't know, present art form within theater and writing plays. So I'm curious, for this first iteration, just in general, or just as you've come to the micro theater form, what in a couple words would you say have you noticed are challenges, and or discoveries about the craft or your process, or just any other interesting things that you've found as you've come to exploring the infinite space of small, and how do you think we can continue to build on this as we continue to just add to this residency? Rachel, start us off.
Okay. I I actually do enjoy the 10-minute play form. I know that I've had other playwrights talk to me and say they enjoy the full-length form more because how can you fit a story into 10 pages? And now we're in the one-page form, right? So how do you fit a story into one page? And I think that it is a unique challenge to do something. I feel like you have to use every single word very intentionally. And I think that that is something that I hope to translate into the other work I write, where every single word is intentional. Each page is telling its own story, right? Like this one page does. Um, I think if anything, it's a good exercise to have, and also to be able to walk away and say, "Look, I have a story that I told in 30 seconds," right?
Yeah.
How wonderful is that? Yeah, I think it's awesome.
I will second what Rachel said. I think with writing this particular play, there were two challenges. One was getting it down to a page and a half. I, it almost got to the point where I was going to futz with the font size just to like get it past the censors. But no, like what Rachel said, like I had to really make what I was writing intentional. Because I sometimes add fluff of like back and forth dialogue that, for if we're doing this micro play, like it's got to be right to the point. So that was my first challenge. The second challenge was submitting it to you while on a bus because of the Wi-Fi. So I don't think that's necessarily a challenge for micro plays in general. I think that was just a challenge for this particular situation.
I think my biggest challenge was trying to figure out what the story was that I was going to tell, because the protest itself, it just felt so big. Like there were so many factors, there's so many people involved. And I think my biggest challenge was like picking like a couple of characters that would be a part of it. And so I just finally went to like the simplest denominator of just two people that were participating, as opposed to like trying to write a play including Bernie Sanders. I sound so strange. I'm sorry. Not sorry. So yeah, that was basically, I think you really do get to the heart of something when it's ordinary people that are telling the story or being the story. So yeah, it's keeping it simple and keeping it regular people. Yeah.
First time I encountered the idea of a one-page play, and it was several years before Micro Chicago. I groaned, I rolled my eyes. I thought, this is just the dumbest thing I've ever heard, which is generally the biggest green flag saying, hey, you really should take a look at this. And so building off what Rachel said earlier about making every word count, what I'm finding very valuable is finding and earning the silences in the play and making the silences have the impact. And because this is a virtual art form that we're working with, what is important to me as well is the visualization. How does it look on the page, right? And my objective is when I'm trying to do a one-page play is to get as much structure into this one page using not only the fewest amount of words, but creating the most white space on the page, right? So that the negative space enhances the impact of the words that I have chosen to put on that page. And I'm looking for either, a laugh, a gut punch, pathos, whatever it is that I in my sense of structure needs to come at about the 3/4 page mark, right? This is a valuable experience for me to get to think about, I don't know if this is a word, concision, being concise, and writing to a prompt, which I suck at.
Well, I love all of this, and on the note of a concise, and you guys feel free to laugh. I said I was going to keep this call to 20 minutes, and I'm pretty sure we've doubled it. So I think that's a perfect segment. Huh?
Oh no.
To kind of further get us into conciseness and kind of wind the call down, I thought it'd be fun to add this little bit called micro bites, which is just a ripoff of a lightning round. So I have narrowed down a couple questions, kind of Chicago, kind of not Chicago centric, and art centric. So I'll ask them very quickly, and just in an effort to further kind of introduce you guys and get to know you guys a little bit more. I'll read it, and we'll just go in our alphabetical order. So we'll go Scott, Rachel, David, and then Tanise. And after that, we'll just kind of do some goodbyes, if that works for everyone. Fantastic. All right. Starting us off, thin crust or stuffed?
Thin.
Stuffed.
Stop.
Then, St. Louis.
Ah. Ah.
What is the best Chicago hot dog?
None.
Oh, Clark Street Dogs.
Wiener Circle.
Maxwell Street.
What was the last thing that you watched or listened to? Any media?
I saw Rajiv Joseph's new play in New York. Na 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 na.
So jealous.
Last thing I watched was an episode of Pokemon, Diamond and Pearl season 10. I did see Treefall done by Ego Death Theater. They closed today.
An episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation, from season 1, the weird season without Riker having his beard. That's all I can think of.
Oh man.
I watched August the Duck making fun of Darman on YouTube.
Lovely. Because oh, go ahead.
Just you're lucky if you don't know who Darman is.
This next one's a little personal because we are currently working our way through the entirety of the Chicago L. First color that comes to mind when I say Chicago L track.
Red.
Brown.
Red.
Green.
What was the last script that you were working on?
My new full-length one, which is not titled.
Maybe a full-length one, bunch of kids in a basement, solar flare, sad.
I just started working on the my Orange Line play about midway.
The final edit through of my screenplay, The Rebound Girl, which is about a guy who was left at the altar.
And our final microbite, when you're not writing, you are blank.
Sleeping.
Selling bras or athleisure.
Lawyering.
Singing.
Amazing. Wonderful. Well, we will sing our way. No, we won't. Into kind of this closing little bit here. Yeah, no, it's too late for that. Where can the greater Chicago-ness or outside of that, where can folks come see some of your stuff, come see you, or read some of your stuff between now and our next spring quarterly?
I've got I've got 2 or 3 things, reading small things going on across the country. Something in Chicago is happening with Ghostlight Ensemble on the 19th at a bar. If you're really interested in what I'm doing, my website is always way up to date. ScottCarterCooper.com.
Cool.
Next up, I am stage managing a Short Leap Theater Company's inaugural show, Clearing. That will be happening in April at the Filament Theater, Portage Arts Lofts, whatever you want to call it. And the other things, I also have a play that will be read with Freshly Brewed at the Understudy. I love chess. It's a kick in the pants. And that will be April 21st. And then if you want to find my stuff, New Play Exchange, Rachel Herriges.
I have a play being performed in Florida in 2 weeks in middle of March, called A Date with Dagon, that I co-wrote with another Chicago playwright. Her name's Dana Hall. Then in May, I have a play being performed in Norway, which is just so wild to think that. Never thought that would be on my bucket list, or on my bingo card, whatever the expression is. Yeah, but it's a play that it's so silly, and I can't even describe it to you, but I'm very excited that it's going to be performed in Norway. So if you need to find information about me, davidlipschutz.com.
Wow, that's impressive. All of you. So we are doing a Zoom recording of my screenplay Bar Hopping. We're recording it on the 23rd of March. And so Bar Hopping, along with other plays that I've done, Zoom recordings, are on my YouTube page, which is Tala Productions. So you can just search for that on YouTube, and there's a whole bunch of stuff there. Yeah.
And that's Talif, Talif, correct?
Talif Productions.
Wonderful. Well, I just want to gush and say how, again, grateful and thankful I am to each of you, not only, again, for sharing some of your Sunday night, because this is Monday scary moments right now as you get to the end. So thanks for sharing some of that. Thank you again also just for your forbearance, your patience, your openness to this just ever further exploring process that we're doing with all of this. And just trust and just being game as we go. And I think we've got our structure now. So we'll just keep riding that wave for a minute. Just thanks to everyone who watches this, anyone who's been following us on the Instagram, which in our link in bio, you can find 3 out of the 4. I don't know, Tanise, if you have a New Play Exchange, but everyone else's is linked in there. So just go to our Instagram, check out those links, check out their plays, and join us again in the spring for our to be determined writing prompt, but that'll be running in May, just after we close Orange Line. So who many of you are writing for as well. So thank you guys. Thanks to everyone out there, whoever you are, wherever you are. If you're in Norway, thanks. We hope that you'll join us again as we continue to explore the infinite space of small.